Today we're going to talk to you about police use of force, specifically the United States Supreme Court case in Graham versus Connor. I'm Scott with Dedicated Threat Solutions. When it comes to use of force, specifically excessive use of force, the landmark case is Graham versus Connor, which is a national standard that's utilized today. In this 1989 case, the United States Supreme Court declared the use of force to be a Fourth Amendment issue subject to an objective reasonableness standard. The ruling states the following: the reasonableness of a particular use of force must be judged from the perspective of a reasonable officer on the scene rather than the 20/20 vision of hindsight. The calculus of reasonableness must embody allowance for the fact that police officers are often forced to make split-second judgments in circumstances that are tense, uncertain, and rapidly evolving about the information of force that is necessary in a particular situation. The reasonableness inquiry in an excessive force case is an objective one. The question is whether the officer's actions are objectively reasonable in light of the facts and circumstances confronting them, without regard to their underlying intent or motivation. Based on this information, when attempting to determine the reasonableness of an officer's use of force, it must be done under the following guidelines. Judge through the perspective of a reasonable officer at the scene. The reasonable officer is expected to view the incident based upon similar circumstances and with the same or similar training and experience. Judgment must be based upon the totality of the facts known to the officer at the time force was applied. One cannot use hindsight or base judgment on information that is found after the conclusion of the incident. This is a particularly big problem we see in the media and also on social media when people make judgments already knowing information of what they saw in that video. But that's not the same information that the officer may have had during the actual use of force incident. And it's not fair to imbue that information onto an officer when he does not have that information. Based on the facts known to the officer without regard to the underlying intent or motivation. What was the information the officer had that led to his or her decision to use a particular level of force? The proper application of what is reasonable takes into account the facts and circumstances of each particular case to include the severity of the crime, whether the suspect poses an immediate threat to the safety of the officers or others, whether the suspect is actively resisting arrest or attempting to evade arrest by flight, the fact that the officers are often required to make split-second judgments. I would implore all members of the media and all of those on social media who are quick to judge to follow these standards as well. The U.S. Supreme Court case does not allow for hindsight bias and state that the officer should have or could have done this or that regarding the use of force. Yet, this is something we see every day in the media, on the news, and in social media. Again, with the benefit of hindsight bias. You see a video clip, you know what's going to happen, you know what the outcome is to both the officer and the suspect in the video. States that each use of force incident is judged on the facts and circumstances of that incident. Information that was not known to the officer cannot be used against the officer after the fact. Again, we see this all of the time with the media having more facts than what the officer had at the time of the use of force incident. Graham versus Connor, the court makes the following important statement. The test of reasonableness under the Fourth Amendment is not capable of precise definition or mechanical application. In other words, this use of force is not like a mathematical equation where you plug in the numbers and variables and you come out with a very specific answer. It does not work that way in the real world, yet too many people put this standard on police officers that's not right and it's not fair. And that's why Graham versus Connor is such a vitally important Supreme Court case for law enforcement officers. Graham versus Connor does not require that officers use the best level of force, only that they use a level of force that is reasonable. Graham does not say anything about escalating or de-escalating force. It does not say that the officers must use minimal force, and it does not say that force must be progressive, where an officer is required to start at the lowest level of force and work their way up to lethal force. Use of force application to judge based upon the following: the totality of the circumstances, from the perspective of a reasonable officer who is on the scene at the moment force was used, without 20/20 hindsight, in circumstances that are tense, uncertain, and rapidly evolving. Again, I would implore all members of the media and everybody on social media, before you make judgments, think about what you are seeing based upon these standards as set forth by the United States Supreme Court in Graham versus Connor. When you watch a video, the video of use of force incidents does not tell the whole story. There's valuable information and relevant information that is prior to the start of the video and potentially at the end of the video. There are also times when the media may manipulate and edit the video, so you're not seeing exactly what happens. You're seeing an edited version of what the media wants you to see, and that is not fair to the officer. You have the luxury of watching the video with hindsight bias. You have more information potentially than what the officer on scene had. You know what the outcome. When an officer is involved in a use of force incident, they may be thinking that they may be killed during that encounter. They don't know if they are going to be okay, if they're going to go home to their family, if they're going to be injured to the point where they're potentially paralyzed. They have no idea what the outcome is going to be. But yet when you watch a video from the comfort and safety of your home with no training on what use of force is, you easily can come to conclusions that are not accurate and they are not realistic, and those points of view that you have should not be placed upon that officer. The media is definitely part of the problem, and they are biased in their presentation and reporting of news relating to use of force incidents. Let us remember that the overwhelming majority of law enforcement officers in the United States perform their job duties legally, ethically, and morally. Those officers who violate their oath that they have taken need to be held accountable. Law enforcement officers do not get a free ride, and the code of silence, while not near as common as it has been in the past, is not acceptable today. As with any profession, there are law enforcement officers who should not be in this profession. Yet, we cannot generalize the actions of a few bad officers to be applied to every law enforcement officer, especially when the vast majority do their jobs legally, morally, and ethically. I ask you to step back during these times and back the blue, support law enforcement officer. Let's work together to get to a solution to any problems that may be occurring within law enforcement and within the community that they serve as well. Please like and subscribe to this video. Hit the notification button so you're notified when new videos come up. I have a bunch of books available on Amazon.com. Current bestsellers are Active Killer Incidents, A Guide for the Armed Civilian, and Building Entry and Room Clearing Tactics, Foundational Principles. Definitely go check those out. I am on multiple social media platforms. If you'd like to link up with me, you can email me at info@dedicatedthreatsolutions.com. And you can also visit my website at www.dedicatedthreatsolutions.com. This is Scott with Dedicated Threat Solutions, and remember, hope is not a survival strategy. Luck is not a survival tactic. Stay safe.